Hey everyone, welcome back to Rubber Duck Writing, and the first episode of the new year. So, new year, new resolution, right? That's the thing we're all supposed to do for some reason at the beginning of the year. I want to get the first draft of my book done this year. Yeah, just one thing. Sounds really easy until you, really start thinking about it and how much you still have to write. I think I'm actually having a really good start to my writing resolution this year. I think. I really have no idea what a good writing rate is for me to get this first draft done by the end of the year, so I'm falling back on the old tried and true method of just putting my head down and plowing forward and hoping things work out. Dee Dee, you mad genius! To give you some context, I've currently got over 35,000 words written so far, with about 8,000 of that coming since the last video update was finished. According to my writing software, that's about 90 pages. Side note, that doesn't include every time I've had to stop and add more to my world building notes because I came up with some offhanded comment that I wanted to make sure I remembered for later use. Maybe. I may never touch it again, but I have a teeny obsession for keeping track of little details for possible future use. Anyway, that qualifies me for novella length. But I'm not aiming for a novella, Ella. No, I want to hit that juicy novel tier. Wait, hang on, I've got something for this. Here we go. This is my general target after checking out a couple of resources online. Given the copious amounts of world building I'm doing, I'm self-classifying into the science fiction/fantasy category, targeting about 90,000 to 120,000 words. Let's be real for a moment. I'm not too worried about word count. Well, not about hitting some arbitrary goal for myself. I have a completely different worry for word count, but I'll touch on that later if that worry starts to come to fruition. Right now, I have 3 pretty clear acts in my mind for how this story is going to flow, although I have no idea right now how long each act is going to take, and that's more than a little intimidating at times. I'm very much an outline style writer, and I have a pretty good idea the amount of story I have left to complete to get to the end, at least in terms of concepts. But concepts don't really translate well to word count lengths for me. Once I get going, that skeleton outline is going to fill in rapidly as I add more details or minor tangents based on how the story is going along, and that just kind of makes things longer than expected as we make things up as we go along. Even though I feel like I've written so much already, I still have this looming wave of story beats that I have to get to, and when it's all up in my head as just a collection of nebulous ideas, it really starts feeling insurmountable. This dread starts to seep in that there's no way I'm ever going to get this all done by the end of the year. And that's when the self-doubt really starts to rear its head. Uncomfortable thoughts like, will anyone want to read this? Can I do this? Am I good enough? And am I wasting my time? Hey! Yeah, you! Yeah, I see you back there! I told you to get out of here! Go on, get! One moment, please. I told you this is my pond, you mother! Honk! Sorry about that. Look, I know, that seemed unnecessarily violent. But trust me, you let one gloom goose move in, and suddenly you're not getting any work done at all, with all that honking self-doubt going on in the background, and you know what? I'm not having it. Now, we can't use cartoon violence to deal with all of our visual metaphors for our fears of inadequacy. I need to come up with some real, tangible solutions to deal with these work dread emotions that are really starting to bubble up. Or you know who will be back. Hack. Oh, I wish a gander would! Here's what I'm trying to make things feel more manageable for myself. I'm a big planning type of duck, as you may have guessed by the centuries worth of world history notes I've written so far. What I've done is sat down and wrote out the remaining story beats for Act 1 and the expected story beats for Act 2. No matter how minor they might seem, if it's the next step in the narrative, it gets its own note. I usually jot these down in a notebook or something and then review them later. I then use the planning tool Trello to help sort these notes into more tangible actions. I'll probably talk more about using Trello for planning in a future episode, but if you're interested now, just go Google it and check it out. With all these story beats in digital card form, I can shuffle them around into whatever order I want to work on them. For me, that's typically sequentially, but once in a while, I'll decide, yeah, I need to do some more world building lore for this piece, and I just don't have it in me tonight, and I really want to finish the scene and just move on. When that happens, I leave a note for future DD in the manuscript and add a new card to the board about the omission so that I can keep track of it and come back to it later. Once I have all my thoughts in place, I look at what I think I can accomplish in my next couple planned writing sessions and assign dates to some of those story beat tickets. Now, instead of 2.5 acts of literary blizzard waiting to fall on me, it suddenly feels like a more gentle story snow falling that I can better focus on this month. Now, I could go and plan dates for every ticket up to the end, but that has a lot of flaws, like story beats having varying lengths, the setup work that's involved, normal life getting in the way, and sometimes I just pass out on the couch after work. Now, you may have noticed that I mentioned 3 acts, but I didn't bother breaking down Act 3 yet. Well, 2 main reasons. The first is that I'm still forming the structure of Act 3 in my head and my notes, and still getting a feel for the characters right now. And the second part is having 3 full acts of cards on my Trello board, just sitting there, watching, waiting. No thanks, we'll get to it soon enough. So that's the writing update for this episode. Just trying to stay motivated and not get crushed under my own ambitions. Just keep floating, man. Moving on to the world building part of the video. Last time, we wrapped up talking about rivers and lakes and how all that flows. But where does all that water flow to once it goes out into the ocean? Good question, Dee. Why, thank you, Dee. And that leads us to our first topic about creating the climate of this planet, ocean currents. Usual disclaimer on these topics. I am by no means whatsoever an expert on ocean currents and their impact on climate. I know they exist, and I know that the Gulf Stream is a pretty important one, but that's really kind of about it. Initially, I thought about just skipping this part and jumping right into climates based on the assumptions I had in my head based on Earth's layout and just wing it. But I started to get nagging doubts in my head about half-assing it. I figured maybe we should 3/4 ass it instead. And that led me to getting a glimpse of how currents work with weather patterns and how they cycle in and out, impacting coastal areas and their climates. It wasn't going to be as easy as just pick a latitude range and say, "Congratulations, son, you're the humid subtropics now." But man oh man am I in over my head here. This is where I plug the incredibly helpful Artifexian and his YouTube channel, where he gets into the nitty-gritty of how world building works from the very basic building blocks. Just about everything I do on climate stuff is based on his videos. What that means is you're going to get a very distilled version from me. I have a link below for that pure, uncut Artifexian ocean current goodness. Seriously, his work is really helpful, and he's got a really nice voice too, so enjoy that. Let's start with a nice clean map with all the mountains and lakes and rivers that we've come up with so far. I went back into WonderDraft and pumped out a black and white map so we can mess around with this like it's a coloring book. Oh, that reminds me, it's time for a mini tool talk. For all the upcoming image manipulation stuff with the map, I'll be using Affinity Designer. It's a nice little vector graphics tool that lets me quickly draw and manipulate graphics on my map. It's gonna be a lot of map making around here for a while. Current maps, climate maps, human migration maps, maps of how lettuce migrates around the world. No, I'm not joking, buckle up. I personally like Affinity Designer because it's a pay once and it's yours piece of software. None of this never-ending software subscription stuff. But really, you could use whatever image manipulation tools you want. You could even print it out, get a box of crowns, and go nuts with it. Ooh, maybe treat yourself to that box of 64 colors. Whoa, with the built-in crown sharpener. I was so jealous of those kids in school. Okay, enough of that. Let's get to the map. Let's start at the equator. First, we're going to put in a current flow to the west. Once those currents hit land, they're going to split. Some will loop back horizontally, and the others will split and work their way north and south along land masses as warm currents. Oh yeah, those are some real nice looking lines right there. Hey look, you try drawing with wings for hands. This is where those warm currents will start to cool and they get pulled back east, as such. Oh, and would you look at that, the currents are about to hit land again. Now, things get a little tricky here. Some of that current is going to return to the equator as a cold current. The others will split and head north and south as a new round of warm currents. Now we get to the 60 degrees parallel, and the process repeats itself again. All that's left is a couple weird pockets of currents. To handle those, we follow the same basic rules of splitting currents at land masses and cycling them around. This is a really simplified version since you're here for writing and not a climatology lecture. Again, if you're really interested in this, go to those Artifixian videos because they do a much better job at explaining this than I can. Now that we have our currents in place, we can mark off where certain zones of warm and cold ocean water are. This may not seem like much now, but it's going to play a big role in our future climate work when it comes to climate zones and marine life. which is as good as a segue into the next episode as any. Next time, we'll build on this foundation and start work on some land climates for all of our living things to thrive in as we get to populating the world. See you next time when I give you another update on all that writing and we make up some new climates.
Quack.